Right now, it is time for This Week in the Lakeville Journal. And we've got Cynthia Haaswinter, who is in our middle studio. Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning.
What was in the big vessel that you brought in?
Coffee.
Okay.
All right, and we have also Janet Manko. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning.
How is everybody?
Trying to figure out how many pieces of candy to get for Halloween because it's a Wednesday and I'm in Salisbury. In Sharon, it's 700 pieces. In Kent, it's 700 pieces. But on a Wednesday in Salisbury, I don't know.
I think you're still going to need the same amount.
Yeah,
I think it's
supposed to be
safe.
good weather.
Yeah.
Finally. It's going to stop raining for 3 hours.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's long enough to put your outfits on. Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
when is Halloween being set? When is it?
Wednesday.
You always celebrate it the same day,
Next
which
Wednesday?
is the 31st.
Yeah. Except
Okay.
in Great Barrington, where they're celebrating it tomorrow night.
That's smart.
Or Sheffield, sorry,
I
Sheffield.
think it's the only night that's not going to have rain after
Yeah.
this weekend.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, looking at the Lakeville Journal, I expect to smell pumpkin spice because I see the colors of the season.
Right? So we tried to there have been a lot of seasonal and spooky activities for the increasingly popular national holiday of Halloween. So we tried to put all of our Halloween stories in this week because, of course, Halloween will happen right after we go to press for next week's paper. So if we covered Halloween on October 31st, it wouldn't make it into the issue until November 8th, I believe, is the next issue after that. So we won't be having really coverage. So that's why look for your spooky stories in this week's paper. And so Winchester Center had its annual cemetery walk, and they used to do this in Sharon. I haven't heard that they're doing it this year, but it was really a fun thing. And people would dress up in period costumes, and they would take over the spirit of people who had passed away and explain why they were important, and so that it's not just a stone in a large grassy field. It's like, oh, that was that person and who's responsible for this or for that. So they did that in Winchester Center, and then we have a great photo that Shaw took.
You've got, and now also you've got two stories about Senator Chris Murphy stressing the need to vote, but also the Democratic candidate for the 5th District, Hannah Hayes. And the latest story is that her opponent has canceled the last two debates. With
Right,
her,
yeah.
saying that, and this is what saying that, well, he just wants to get out and get his message to the people.
Well, he didn't return our calls. We asked him, and of course Senator Murphy's opponent too, to do the same thing that Patrick did with the two Democratic candidates, and they did not respond to us.
Is this any way to run a railroad? That's the
Yeah, it says something. So, so we have Chris Murphy, of course, who's been such a great champion of the Northwest Corner, and far from not returning our call, his office actually called and said, "Do you need to talk to Chris?" And we said, "Yeah, we want to talk to Chris." So he's great. He's up here all the time, and we had a great conversation with him, with Patrick doing the interviewing. But Chris, what Chris really stressed is why it's so important. What is at stake in this election on November 6th? And I think it's important for everybody to read that, whatever side of the aisle you sit on, and just realize there's some big issues that are that could potentially change and could change our lives in the next couple of years. So read that article, think about what's coming up. And then the very impressive Johanna Hayes, who's been up here also quite a bit, and actually who was encouraged by Chris Murphy to run, and I think that was a really great service actually that he's done for the 5th District. So she's been up here a lot. She is very commonsensical, very independent thinker, really thoughtful, really lovely person, which I think to say she's lovely doesn't really indicate her strength and what she's bringing to her campaign. We have a lot of respect for her. And, of course, we would have been happy to talk to Manny Santos and Matthew Corey, but, again, they haven't reached out to us. I must get 100 emails a day from people running for office in, like, Texas, but I never heard from Manny Santos or Matthew Corey. So,
all right. The Salisbury Forum, speaking about the future, really it was spot on for being about current events this time.
So Tom Nichols, who starts off the new Salisbury Forum series, and we have another one coming up in a couple of weeks with Dr. Joshua Ginsburg from the Carey Institute in Millbrook, and he's a very interesting, again, a very independent thinker, very knowledgeable, and gives you some good facts. So Tom Nichols is great, and Patrick Sullivan, who goes to a lot of talks, really was impressed with him. And a lot of what he was talking about is the flip side of this idea of the media being lying and not telling the truth, which is that the media is complex and that stories are complex and that the media tends to give you short bursts and you really have to pay attention in a democracy. And so he's warning that we all need to really look into the stuff that we have strong opinions about and make sure that we have all the facts right, which is, as newspaper people, we 100% support that.
All right, Nature's Notebook with Tim Abbott.
Tim Abbott sometimes really outdoes himself with the poetic, thoughtful, observant nature of his columns, and this is an especially good one. And he sort of says, I thought it was going to be a great color autumn, and so far it hasn't been. And we'll see what the next 5 days of rain do to the leaves on the trees, but to me it just feels like everything's starting late. I think it's been a beautiful autumn. I think that the sky and the clouds and, of course, the rainbows have been extraordinary. But read Tim, and it's just a thoughtful, get you in the mood for autumn, very sort of wistful but beautiful column.
All right, moving inside on the color page, we see the picture of course, Brent Colley with Todd Anderson. The Ellsworth Station celebrated 50 years.
And, of course, our first selectman, Sharon's first selectman, always has to be in color because he has red hair. And so Todd Anderson. And so this actually had happened. We'd held the story for a week. The Ellsworth Station is one of the remote fire stations in Sharon, all the way over on Route 4. And was opened 50 years ago because the fire company couldn't get there fast enough and there wasn't another mutual aid station nearby. So that, for instance, if you have an accident in Salisbury that's over in Amesville, you'll get the Falls Village Company will be able to access you quickly. There wasn't a sufficiently close reciprocal station. So Ellsworth Station was open, and, all of our fire volunteers do such an amazing job. And, to be in the I think that there's a social component and a bonding component, and to be in that more remote part of the fire company, you really have to thank them so much for what they do.
All right. And Sotheby's has moved from Lakeville to Salisbury.
Yes. And, funny how corporate entities work. But so John Harney Jr., I have to say, I love all the people that work in that office. It's one of the most fun, most independent real estate offices and within this very a big corporation, and it's just a super fun group. And so they've moved to Salisbury and are looking for better foot traffic. And, of course, they probably just want to see the bear coming into town. Actually, we haven't seen much of the bear.
But the bear's back.
Oh, it is?
He's been haunting around our street, and he did go to On the Run, I think, once last week.
Elliot Osborne posted on Instagram last night a photo of a very large bear and 3 small bears trundling through his yard in Hammertown area.
All right, and I don't want to say anything about politics, but Craig Minor really does look like Grizzly Adams with gray hair. Yeah. It's a great picture.
It's a great picture. He's very outdoorsy.
He is.
He is, right.
He is. All right, we'll move on to the annual town meeting is set for November 16th in the town of Cornwall.
So all of our towns have their town meeting at different times, usually between like November and January, depending on when they do their audit. The fiscal year ends on June 30th, of course. So all the towns put together their town report, which is really interesting reading. Whether or not you're new to a town, it's always fun to read the town report. You learn a lot about what's going on. So the annual town meeting is to approve the town report and the budget, the audit. Excuse me, not the budget. But, of course, we are beginning budget season, and this town meeting vote will also be about the 5-year capital spending plan in Cornwall.
And the Falls Village story by Patrick Sullivan, Don't Feed the Bears, but that is the same for Salisbury now because you're getting close to the end of the season. So
bring in your bird feeders. This is apparently there's one person in town who's really been active in feeding the bears, and so they're looking for ways to curtail that activity.
Stop.
Like, hello, there's a lot of bears here. As Janet and I know, there's a lot of bears all over Falls Village now.
Yeah.
All right. And on page A5, new purpose.
Wait, you can't skip the Metcalf. That's a big deal.
Oh, pardon me. That's right. How could I do this in North Canton?
North Canton, very big turnout for these meetings. So there's 2 separate activities going on with Ben Metcalf's paving company. One is that he wanted to expand use at his plant out there, but also so that's been contentious. But also there's been some accusations that he is doing hot patch. Hot asphalt, which he's not supposed to be doing. But there's a question about how the regulation is run and what their permit says. So that's been ongoing and will continue into November.
All right, now we can move to the old boards. I think this is kind of like when the trees fell, the beautiful
white oak
trees.
at Hoosey, and the twin oaks here.
And they, I've got a couple of things from the trees in here. Now the old boards are going to be good for something else.
Yes, Richard Griggs, who is so active and thoughtful and such a big part of life in Cornwall. When they replaced the old bumpy boards of the iconic covered bridge in West Cornwall that leads from Sharon. He not only did a recording of the sound of the cars bump, 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 going through the bridge, but he also he arranged for the boards to be saved and for woodworkers and artisans to get hold of them and make things out of them. So they had a showing of work on October 20th as part of the Newcomers' Tea, which is a really nice tradition. In Cornwall, I believe they had 44 new people who were RSVP'd to come. And the idea is that they go, Cornwall's really great. You know why it's so great? Because we all help out. Here's ways you can help out. And they had the visual aid of people making very cool things out of the boards.
All right. And I made the mistake of driving through Kent last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you didn't know what you
It's like
thought.
going to Brigadoon. It's a different world.
I forgot it was Gilmore Girls weekend.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
And you know what? I've never gone. I don't know how. I'm not a big Gilmore Girls fan.
You can't move in town. I'm telling you. You can't move in town.
And everybody says that actually Kent is so much more organized than when they did it in Washington. And Janet will remember that we got angry letters from Washington saying this is not good to do during leaf peeping season in New England. But Kent has been very welcoming to it. The Chamber of Commerce loves it. The merchants all said they loved it. And the fans love it. So I think that the turnout has been pretty consistently high. I think it's been the third year that they've been in Kent. And, of course, the Gilmore Girls are very important around here. The late Ed Herman was Grandpa Gilmore, and a very beloved show here.
All right, but it was just amazing. All right, there's a real nice appreciation letter in memory and appreciation of Evan Rashkoff by Claire in the paper this week.
It's hard to believe it's been a year, and Claire actually, because I really like Claire, and she spent a year thinking about how to say thank you to the community because it was so meaningful to her, and she just struggled, and then finally, was able to write this out, and really just, whether or not you're friends with Claire, just a nice reminder of what we have here.
All right, time to go to the opinion page. And Janet, I said to Cynthia as she came in, and I said earlier this morning, I don't know if I've ever seen so many letters all in one issue, this many pages of letters in the paper. But we'll start off with your editorial, your endorsements for the elections.
Right. I won't go through what our endorsements are. People can buy the paper for that. But we do endorse. Many newspapers don't anymore, but we do, and we do it for Senate and the Fifth House District, the First House District, because remember, our territory is a bit expanded now than it was 2 years ago because we have the First District and the 63rd House District included, as well as the 64th House District, the 30th Senate District, and the governor's race. So by all means, give it a read, and we have a lot of letters, and we'd had a lot of letters last week, too. Even more this week, you're right. And so that is good. We do not solicit letters, so people know. We got a lot of comments during the week that somehow we had biased toward a certain candidate because of the letters we had in the paper. But, we don't solicit letters. We take them as they come, and all the time, I always try to get in all the letters we get for that week, if at all possible, because, and this is true especially during election season, we want everybody's voice to be heard, and if we have to save some, which we did have to, 2 weeks ago we had to save a few because we didn't have quite enough space, it just catches up with us the next week, right up until the election. So we really try to get everybody's voice out there. We do it as we get them. I had one letter was held this week, but we had 31 in the paper, and the one that was held was just my error, not processing it. So thank you to everybody who writes. We value your opinions, and we want to have them, and we go out of our way to try to put them out there for our readers because, these pages, we put in extra pages. They're not necessarily covered by advertising, so I'll invite everybody who enjoys those letters to advertise in the paper, too.
And for those of you that get the papers, the letters are not only on the opinion page A7, but also A10 and A11, and even you thank goodness managed to get all your other things squeezed in on your Viewpoint page between A8 and A9.
That's right. That's true. So, yes, for anybody, some letter writers will feel that if they're not on the opinion page, it doesn't count. But, of course, that's not true. Our readers certainly know how to turn the pages, and they will find the letters because they're interesting and they want to hear what their neighbors have to say. And, it's just a matter of physics. We can't fit all the letters on one page unless we did them in a very small type.
And the columns that you have, Ralph Nader, Matt Gordon, also a Democrat at U.S. House might open. So, I mean, a lot of great columns also this week.
Yes, which we're glad to have. Matt Gordon of Lakeville has started writing a bit for us, which is great. He's interested in everything, and this one is a really interesting look at the world's relationship, really, with Russia. So give that a read. Ralph Nader on Looking for Answers. Really timely, really good. And Dick Ollis on the Democratic U.S. House possibilities, what that would mean for the country. So, and Dick always has a very interesting take on things.
I love the picture that you've got, have a seat and watch the seasons change. That's your picture, Janet.
Yes.
That's a real nice picture.
That is Twin Lakes, and so that's the kind of place that if you're feeling a little anxious about anything, just go up that road and look out there, and that can calm you down. That's really nice.
All right, and of course letters. I mean, it really it's. I think it shows the indication of how many people are going to get out and vote in our area this year.
I hope so. I hope that is what it's indicating. And we're proud that they choose to have their opinions in our pages because they could certainly just, throw them up online or put them wherever, and they go through a lot of trouble to get them to us. And they're all thoughtful. They're all well written, and we're happy to have them.
I can tell you. Online, writing letters online is fine and great, but there's no feeling like penning a letter and send it again to your local paper or to your regional paper and having that letter published.
That's right, and
there's no feeling like that.
Well, what you have to do is teach people that. I mean, from your perspective, absolutely. It's now that everyone's had, a massive opportunity to say whatever they want online. Now it's time to do some cogent letter writing and learn what it feels like.
And also, Janet, the great thing about what you do is you verify each letter.
Yes.
So it's not a letter that might possibly be from somebody or not, like that can happen online.
Yes.
You verify each letter. I think that's what people have to understand. You verify each letter.
Exactly. I speak with, I contact every single person who writes and confirm that I received it. And part of the reason is to be sure that the identification is correct, and part of the reason is to give people a chance to think about it again and reword something if they think about it. And that happened a couple of times this week, which I thought was really interesting.
All right, so now we will take a look at Compass.
Let me quickly just say, Tri-Corner Real Estate is so great this week.
Yeah.
And I think people maybe don't think, if you're not looking for a house, you're like, oh, I'm not going to look at it. It's so interesting. You see all these houses in there and you're like, where's that? Like, that's in town in Sharon? Are you kidding me? Like giant houses and estates in Falls Village and Salisbury. And I have to say, it always gives you a sense of the economy, like I would say our economy looks pretty healthy right now based on what's in Tri-Corner, but really quite fun to read on its own. So we have Compass this week. Alexander Wilburn. I think that our generation all kind of felt like, oh, yeah, Studio 54. And I think that has become iconic and historical. It's like a museum piece. So for young Alexander Wilburn, who's a very sophisticated person, but young, interviewed Richard Lambertson, who lives here in Sharon, in the center of town, and worked at Studio 54 as a young man when it was not really quite Studio 54 yet, when it was just this kind of fun, cool place, and later grew into, this iconic historic place. So Alex does a nice job of setting the historic framework of what Studio 54 was, and talks to Richard about what it was like working there. But he and my friend Barry Cord are going to be speaking on Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, I think, at the movie house in Millerton, interviewed by the very entertaining Jonathan B. from Hunter B. in Millerton, and talking about Studio 54 and back in the day. And Barry Kieselstein Cord, for people who don't know him, was a very iconic social boldface name in the 70s and 80s, and is a wonderful guy and has great stories. And of course, Richard Lambertson, also from the famous leatherware company Lambertson Truex, and also Privet House here in the area. That is going to be the most fun outing ever, so people should definitely go to that. And then they're screening the new film about Studio 54. And then Marsden Epworth, who's so brilliant and a fantastic cook and lived in China for many years. People may not know that about her, but does a story about the two new purveyors of ramen noodles around here. One is the Asian Kitchen in Millerton at the grocery store, which is owned by the Choi family. And they do beautiful, I will speak from personal experience, beautiful ramen and udon there. I think it's about $9, and they wrap it up beautifully. And as Marsden describes, you can go in and choose your topping. And then also the very lovely Noah Sexton, who has Below the Salt, which is an excellent restaurant in Salisbury in what used to be the lockup space. And they are using noodles from a purveyor in Chinatown, which I think is great because you can get some very beautiful noodles handmade from the experts, and makes their own broth and lots of interesting toppings there. But also they have that beautiful prefix menu, which is stunning and interesting. And then the very amusing Patrick Sullivan is back talking about something he loves, which is horror films. There's a new iteration of the film Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, who was the star of the original. And Patrick says, they skipped those 9 sequels or whatever that was in the middle, and they went back to the original, paid homage to it in the new Halloween, and a very entertaining, as always, review from Patrick. And I spent my Sunday afternoon driving around with a young man named Anthony Ashmore, who was filming a horror film here in sort of East Canaan / Sheffield. No pun intended with the use of the word slash. But that's going to be coming out, I think, next year, and we're hoping they'll do a screening here. But again, that's also an homage to horror films of the 70s and 80s. And then we have the calendar, which is small, but does get some of the main activities coming up. There's a ton coming up this weekend.
All right, and there's that and much, much more in the Lakeville Journal. And, of course, you'll find it online, tricornernews.com, also on Facebook. And, yes, newsstands, home delivery, mail delivery as well.
And we'll have candidate bios and a sample ballot in next week's paper.
All right, we will speak to you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That is This Week in the Lakeville Journal here on Robin Hood Radio. Once again, you can find them at tricornernews.com on the web and also on Facebook.